All right. Good morning, everyone. And we are live. Thank you so much for your patience. We got a little bit later start today. We wanted to account for enough time for W to join us from wherever he is nowadays. However, V is on vacation, a much deserved vacation. So, V, enjoy. Also, do me a favor. I'm not going to go over all of our social links. The most important thing that you can do right now to help Rogue Money is obviously to share our information. So whether it's our website, our links, our articles, our videos, share that in your network to continue growing the Rogue Media brand. Also want to thank our sponsors, myfreedomnow.us. In the event that you are in need of credit repair, need a loan for either an opportunity, debt consolidation, whatever, myfreedomnow.us. Gold USB. If you need to go dark online, it has military grade encryption. You're needing a very secure Bitcoin wallet, My Gold USB. So, W, thank you so much for joining this morning. How are you, sir?
Good.
So, we had some emails going around last night in regards to these recent revelations come forth to us from the DNC in regards to Seth Rich. And so, whatever topic, whatever direction you want to take it, go for it.
Well, of course, may very well be that your listeners have already read those articles, but the latest twist on the Seth Rich thing is that they're trying to spin this illusion that Seth Rich handed off information that then eventually went to WikiLeaks through this Russian attorney who's also the one that met with Donald Trump's son. This woman attorney who doesn't even speak English and like that, and that she was the conduit. So the Russians did it again, as though somehow the Russians were trying to interrupt in our election process and political process. The reality is she doesn't speak English. She would have been very difficult for him to communicate with or get to in the first place. I mean, how does he? Who's the point of contact? Does he call her? Does he pick up the phone and talk to her? Does he somehow have a conversation where his trust level uh, reaches a point where he decides to throw caution to the wind and take this very sensitive information and hand it off to her, and she is somehow going to get it to WikiLeaks for sure in his behalf, and that's where it's going. Look, he doesn't speak Russian. She doesn't speak English. There had to have been a point of contact that somehow puts them together, and then he's got to decide that he's got a trust level with her. In the industry, it's known and trusted. You have to deal with people that you know and trust. So with this most sensitive stuff that he's gotten his whole life, and he's a young guy. He's not, 50 years of experience. He's what, 26. So there
Yep.
would have to have been some person that would have been an intermediary that would have convinced him that this is the person we work through. And then while the kid may be uh, uh, in the process of some form of, what he believes isn't betrayal, but trying to um, pass off information that he thinks will affect the world. Because what was Seth Rich? He was a closet Bernie Sanders guy. He realized that he's at the DNC, and the DNC is damaging his guy. And so the DNC has decided to go with Hillary. And he wants to try to undermine that because he realizes that Debbie Wasserman Schultz and her whole crew is screwing with the process. So is he going to go to the Russians or somebody connected with Russia to get his stuff to WikiLeaks? Has he got a point of contact that's going to make that possible somehow that nobody else can do it? I just don't see any plausible way that happens. And to now come in and spin this as a plausible way that happens today at this point in time, nah. What was the real deal? That crew, that attorney, has already been revealed to have been a conduit, a point of contact for DNC people, Hillary people, um, with the stuff that's come out previously for the mischief they did trying to corral in Trump's son. And he didn't buy into it. He just, he did the meeting as a courtesy, had to, you're in that realm. And when you're in that realm and somebody in that way tries to reach out to you, you do the meeting, you find out what's there. Doesn't mean you agree with them. Doesn't mean that you've bought into them. You just don't turn them down. What comes of it may or may not be valuable, but you kind of got to do all of them because you don't know what they got. And they reach out to you. They're not nobody. She wasn't nobody. But that also, at the same time, doesn't mean that they kissed and made love, that they decided that they were had to work together. Look, if they actually worked together, there would have been many more contacts down through the ranks. Trump's people never worked with this attorney. Seth never worked with this attorney, and I doubt there was ever any real contact at all between them. Just that never happened. Seth, while he distributed a tremendous amount of information over to WikiLeaks, even there, I don't think he had any clue that the Awan brothers existed or were doing anything. He was looking merely at what was happening with the activity that nixed the Sanders campaign and put a knife in the back of Hillary over that in time to maybe make a difference. I think that he even felt at that time that there was a possibility that Sanders could somehow be saved or something in the campaign. And Sanders has plenty of his own problems, but that was never going to happen.
Right. It's just amazing that here we are, 8-9 months later, that a quote unquote DNC anonymous staffer shares the information in regards to Seth Rich, and how perfectly this fits the narrative American people to believe once again that the Russians interfered with the election, which we know did not happen. This was completely an inside job. And you point out some very good things. Seth doesn't speak Russian. This Russian attorney doesn't speak English. And not only on top of that, the unmasking that occurred with Trump, with so many others, you would have known that this information, if true, months ago. I mean, it's just now that this information is coming out regarding the Awan brothers, their access that they had, that they're trying to flip that narrative, if you will, to try to have the Americans still continue to believe that the Russians had something to do with interfering in the elections.
Well, it's known and trusted. He didn't know her and he didn't trust her. How could he have trust her? He didn't know her. With this most sensitive stuff in your whole life, he knows he's dealing in very, very rarefied air. Even as a young guy, he knew that what he was throwing was not just a Molotov cocktail, but a 10,000-pound bomb in the building next to him. He was aware of the fact that he was dealing with highly explosive material. That's why he knew to get it to WikiLeaks. And by the way, was it really him? He had the access. Who was it that was actually engineering this? I think it was his brother. His brother's the one with the actual technical experience, had access also. The reality is, I believe his brother, who was the technician. Seth was not a technician in the same sense in the computer realm. And so the other person that hasn't actually been raised very often here is what was Seth Rich's brother's involvement in all of this. But let's look at it. Let's look at the picture at a broader level. What I'm concerned about is that while we need to get to who killed Seth Rich and what were the circumstances, a couple of just little known details here. Most of your listeners don't know or have never heard that at the same time that this happened, within just a couple of hours of Seth Rich's murder, an FBI agent whose vehicle was there in the area supposedly had his vehicle broken into and lost a couple of weapons that were stolen out of his vehicle. We've never had it determined where the weapon came from or what it was that killed Seth Rich. So,
correct.
Is it the FBI agent's weapon that was used in the murder? Is the FBI agent claiming the theft in order to say it wasn't his gun? If it was, I didn't do it. Somebody else did it. They stole the weapon out of my car, went over, found Seth Rich walking through the park and killed him. Seriously? Think about that. And how many times have you heard an FBI agent having his weapons stolen or his car broken into? It's extremely convenient. So, you've got to kind of wonder about that in proximity to the location where Seth Rich was. And what was the FBI agent doing in that area? What was his detail? What was his assignment that night? Was he part of a detail that was monitoring or watching Seth Rich?
Right.
What was his job duties that night? He was at a bar earlier, and was it the same bar that Seth Rich was at? There's certainly unanswered questions there, but let's look at the big picture. Our situation with Russia is decaying, not anymore by the week or the day, but by the hour. Russia is taking actions to protect itself politically, financially, militarily from the U.S. because of this deteriorated relationship that we have that in large measure is swirling around this claim that they interfered in our elections. The situation on multiple fronts, not just Syria, is decaying by the hour. And so what is going to be the end result of the fact that we're this relationship, even if it's a tenuous one, at least some level of cooperation, interaction is being put on the ropes. And remotely, but in that same camp, you would have to include China as well as Iran. We fired a couple of rounds off to warn off Iranian ships the other day that were close to us. Any given moment, something like that can, take a wild turn. So all of this, in other words, while the DNC is trying to save its bacon from whatever's afoot here because they want to survive their own little scams and machinations that are going on with Debbie Wasserman Schultz, with Hillary, with their attempts to get into office here in the country. When you get right down to the end game here, while they're trying to protect themselves legally from being literally going to jail possibly, their little game to protect themselves at an individual level could very well be the push that pushes us into some type of a for real shooting war, and at the very least destroys decades and decades of work to try to stabilize us with these other nations at some global level. So if we get into war, which I have said before that I personally believe we're looking at here in the next few weeks to a couple of months in Syria. If we get into some kind of a shooting conflict there, will this have played a part in it? How many lives will have been lost because of this little gambit that these small, tiny, puny people have been involved in at the expense of the rest of the world?
That's a great point. That's a very valid point. And so many times I look at all this stuff as just a complete distraction, and you nailed it. I mean, look at the actions of what recently. I mean, we're not talking about old news. We're talking less than a week ago where new sanctions are passed. Now Russia has expelled, uh, U.S. diplomats in Russia, breaking any type of relationship. And this is a true test of Putin. I think he's understanding. I think he had a little bit of faith at the beginning in regards to what Trump could get accomplished. However, we're seeing that trust and that confidence just completely fade away.
Well, let me say this. Trump sent signals in many ways to Putin that he was trying to work with him to de-escalate the situation, and I think those communications, those intents, were genuine. Um, uh, but the deep state, this power behind the power that I've spoken of many times, that's very strong. Even amazingly, a lot of your people are going to roll their eyes or not understand, have even a starting place to understand what I'm about to say. But there's a communication that happens by the numbers. And so every number has a significance to this crowd that's running things in the background in Washington, D.C. They're an occultic crowd.
Hey, W, real quick,
Yeah.
listeners, this is very important to listen what W has to say here. This is very important to listen to this. So go ahead, W.
Yeah, the crowd that's running Washington D.C., this deep state crowd, they do everything they do based on certain celestial alignments, numbers, everything else, and they think they get power from doing that. They're an occultic group. Washington D.C. and its very layout is an occultic city, so the relationship of the buildings, how many steps between each building, their alignments to the sun and to Sirius, the dog star Sirius, even the pets that the presidents get with their dogs and things like that have hidden meaning, and so they believe they get power from doing this. Now, when Putin decided a number of American diplomats that had to leave Russia, he chose the number with a message. It wasn't just an arbitrary number of people he chose. And that message was a behind the scenes message to the occultists who he knows are the real opposition that he's dealing with. And let me just add, Pentagon, 5-sided building. Why is that? Because 5 is the number of defense and death to your opponents in the occultic world. Just like for Christians, or in a biblical sense, 5 is a number of grace. So what did Putin do? He kicked out 755 diplomats. So the 2 5s, could be aimed at the death and defense Pentagon side, but that's not what the number is actually specifically referring to. The number there is 17. And 17 is the number of Osiris. And Osiris is what the entire city of Washington, D.C. is built around. The spire at the center of the city, which is the Washington Monument, is actually the obelisk commemorating Osiris. And it's actually a phallic symbol. And because Osiris in the mysteries of the gods was the one that was killed by his brother and dismembered, and Isis, his sister mother, collected all the parts, and then she couldn't find his penis, so she fashioned one out of stone and had sex with his dead body, and then supposedly had a son uh, uh, that kept on the bloodline or whatever. So all around the world, you see these obelisks, these monuments that look like the Washington Monument. There's one in the Vatican. You see them all over the world in these cities. In Baghdad, Saddam had built his own version of the occultic monuments that we have in Washington, D.C. And you go there and you realize, oh my gosh, it's everywhere in the world. They're doing it over and over and over again.
Right. Absolutely.
Hidden family, hidden power, hidden deep state that is working all across the world to bring about their new world order, their globalist order. So when Putin kicked out 755 diplomats, what was the hidden message? What was the hidden number? 17 is Osiris's number. Whenever you see 17 or multiples of 17, that is their power number. So, for example, what's the most powerful, in a military sense, base on U.S. soil? Or, it was purported to be at the time it was done, where you had to have a power number to back your base. In the occultic world, 3 times anything is the maximum power of a spell. So if you turn 3 times in the circle, you knock 3 times on the door, 3 times your power number is the most powerful version of a spell that you can do in this occultic order. What's 3 times 17? 51. So where's our most secret base, where our most powerful weapons are fielded here in this country? Area 51. When you start to understand how this works and what's going on, then you look at the news and you see what is being communicated between these leaders. Putin sent a hidden 17 with 755, 7 plus 5 plus 5, 17. That's the number that the entire city of Washington rotates around. All actions, all efforts in Washington revolve around the center of the city, which is the obelisk, which is the Washington Monument. In fact, even their actions at the time of news conferences or major decisions, you can look at where the shadow of the Washington Monument falls on the buildings around it at that precise time of day. And events that are going to be world changing are timed to where that shadow is going to hit at that exact minute or hour. So you wonder when senators, congressmen, agency heads come out and make some critical announcement, oftentimes it's just at that time of day when the monument shadow is crossing over that location. And I apologize for a little bit of noise in the background. I'm here by the railroad yard.
No, it's fine.
Okay, well, I'm 5 hours removed from you guys out there in the East Coast. I'm in the land of the midnight sun up here, and so there is no nighttime for us here. So today.
So I completely agree. It was a clear message in regards to what Putin, the message that he was sending. Now, also, I also want to get your take.
It was a message to Washington, the city, and Washington, the core of power. It was a message to that occult, hidden hand deep state. Because why? Does Putin want to tell Trump to go whatever himself? No, he was even letting Trump know that he understands that what's happening here is being pushed, driven, orchestrated by the people behind the scenes. So how can he let Trump know he gets it, he understands who the true source of the conflict is, and kind of reassure Trump he gets it, he understands the problem, and also address the true power in Washington, D.C. that he knows, he gets, he understands precisely where this threat's coming from, and he's not mystified about it. He's sending a message. Why 755? Because it's a message. Why not 754
Bingo.
or 700 or 750? No, it's a message. That's the whole point. In fact, even in the articles that you look, we don't know how President Putin came up with that number. They had some, but that's the number that they chose. Yeah, because it's a message. So what's going to come of all of this? Why should we be sweating? Because let's look at the over time, what's going on. Trump is the reason he came into power, the reason he got the presidency, is because his backers, in large measure, were a Jewish component, people that were, support Israel. They may be Zionists, some of these occultists, that's their claimed heritage, etc. So let's just take it at face value that he has a large number of folks that are Jewish that have Israel's back and Israel's best interests, and they decided to back Trump. At face value, they were hoping for some assistance to protect Israel, because at face value, Israel wasn't getting help from the U.S. and Obama, putting his shoes up on the table when his picture's being taken, talking on the phone to Netanyahu, and you see the soles of his shoes. Was that an accident? No. Supposedly, it's a hidden message to show the soles of your feet to a person in the Mideast, in the Arab Jewish world, is like an insult. So having the White House press photographer take a picture of Obama with his shoes on the table, on the desk, to the camera, while the caption says he's talking to Netanyahu, yeah, he was sending a message how he thinks of him. It's a horrible, terrible insult. So the perception was that Obama was anti-Israel, of course, backing the Muslim Brotherhood and all this other stuff. And so within this crowd, they want to be able to back or get a candidate that's going to have Israel's back in this time of crisis in the Mideast. And so if that's true, if that's what was going on, if that's what you take at face value, then how are they going to get that payoff? Where's it happen? What's the biggest threat to Israel right now? Israel's biggest threat this exact instant isn't Assad, never was. Assad wasn't a threat to Israel, really. He wasn't going to invade. He wasn't going to do anything. He was going to keep a strong border. But Assad was allowing Hezbollah to use his turf, as a staging point. And Hezbollah, this terrorist group that Iran is backing, has become incredibly powerful. So Hezbollah has been pre-staging weapons all across Syria for a couple of decades, but especially in the last decade. Now, a lot of your listeners aren't aware of this or haven't paid attention, or it's old news that they'd forgotten about. But several years back, about 5 years ago, there were 4 explosions over Syria, over supply depots that were transfer points, where weapons were being shuttled into Syria from Iran and then distributed out to all the caves and nooks and crannies across Syria that Hezbollah was hiding stuff in. Those 4 explosions were very interesting and unique. Two of
I
them
remember
were at
those.
daytime, and
Yep.
2 of them were at night. Now, the interesting thing about that, everybody said they didn't know what the cause of the explosions were, and how they happened, and maybe there was an explosion inside the arms depot, and somebody had put a munition there. And what these were missiles that were being routed into Syria from Iran, and then being dispersed out in caves. Now, picture, back in the Gulf War, Gulf War One primarily, when we decided we had to go in there and take out all the various things that Saddam had that could be a threat to us. And so we had an air campaign that lasted about 40 days. And that air campaign, we're just flying constantly. You have the whole United States military that took 6 months of pre-staging to get ready to go. And we're running aircraft sorties day and night for 40 days to hit all these targets, to take out Saddam's ability to be a threat to our military. It was a very involved job, and Saddam, had all this stuff out there. Hezbollah has been secreting the stuff away in caves and nooks and crannies all over Syria for the stuff that'll come in this next war for arguably 10 to 20 years. It would take more than 40 days of day and night flying in an area you dominated, where you didn't have the Russian military and air force already willing to, engage you with S-300, 400, and 500 missiles to take out all that stuff. It's a very involved job. Israel isn't going to be able to do it. So the Israelis, realizing that they needed to get these missiles taken out before they got dispersed, while they were still in these logistics centers in one place, took action. And how do we know it was the Israelis and it wasn't just terrorists or special services? Because the White House, Obama, outed them. When the fourth explosion happened, it was, I believe the fourth one was during the day, but it was a daytime explosion. And there was video from somebody's, camera that was there in the area of the explosion that was distributed all over the place. All 4 explosions, I believe there was video of them, but 2 of them are at night. So all you see is a flash, and then the city's illuminated, and it's out. In the daytime, and you have this cloud. In the daytime ones, the 2 there, you got to see the mushroom cloud and the whole smear. And what did you see? If you go back and look at those videos, you saw that they were air bursts. They were not on the ground. They were exploded several hundred feet above the arms depot transfer point for these missiles. And that's a crucial clue. In order to have an air burst of sufficient heat and power to cause these weapons to spontaneously blow hundreds and hundreds of feet away, to get that hot and blow up, and then the whole depot go up, be incinerated, takes a tremendous amount of heat and power. Unbelievable. The tonnages would be off the charts. But then there's one other clue. The White House outed it in that last explosion and said that it was a drone fired from an Israeli submarine that had brought the explosive device to that depot, which was then detonated. And that it got in there because it was a stealth drone that wasn't detected at the local level until the burst happened. Now, think about what you're going to fire off of a submarine out in the Mediterranean. How big is that aircraft? Is it a 737? Is it a large fighter jet? How big of a drone are we talking? The drones that they're firing off of those subs are only a few meters across. It's got to be able to go under the water with the sub and covertly surface and then launch. This isn't a huge drone. This is a fairly, it's what we would term an intermediate sized drone. It's not something that they're carrying in somebody's backpack. It's not designed to go a mile or two. This thing went a few hundred miles to the target, had enough fuel load to make that distance. When it got there, though, how much explosives could it be carrying? Is it got 500 pounds of C4? What could it possibly have? Has it got a, medium-sized nuclear weapon or something? Where's the fallout if it was a nuclear weapon? The speculation has been, I agree with it. On some level, I was probably part of the saying it, was it's a special type of nuclear device that's an ultra compact nuclear weapon. It's a low residue nuclear weapon. We've had them around for a long time. The problem is when you get too small in a nuclear device, the physics don't work because you have to have a certain amount of mass in order for there to develop criticality to create nuclear mass. And so if you get below that volume of nuclear material, then they're in types of weapons that we were firing off in the 40s and 50s and early 60s, you wouldn't be able to reach criticality. However, if you go to other physics that aren't discussed in the universities now and understand that even the speed of light isn't the speed limit, then you can have much smaller devices about the size of a golf ball, and that the material can go critical because of the way that things are jostled. And because you have such a tiny volume of nuclear material, now you have ultra low residue, very little residue. Some of these earthquakes that you're feeling around the country and around the world are actually ultra low residue devices that are exploded to create underground caverns, caves, as a location to be built out for facilities. And they're habitable because there isn't a bunch of nuclear residue left over after the explosion in that glassified chamber, which now has very strong reinforced walls because it's glass. So when the White House, you can go back and look, the White House leaked out through I think it was at a press conference, that the explosion that happened over this last location was not from the U.S. That was the point of the news conference. The U.S. didn't blow up something over this arms transfer point. It was a message to Assad and to Russia and everybody else and to Iran. That was his primary goal, was to let Iran know that we weren't being two-faced. If you remember, behind the scenes, Valerie Jarrett and her crew were working through Qatar, negotiating.
Oh, absolutely.
With,
absolutely.
Right. They were negotiating with Iran to try and get a nuclear arms deal with Iran so that Obama could claim, credit for, saving the world from a nuclear threat from Iran. That they were going to, stop doing all their nuke stuff. So with this in the background, the White House needed to send a clear message to Iran: we didn't destroy your missile inventory that you were given to Hezbollah in these 4 explosions. They said it was a drone fired off of a sub in the Mediterranean that was the source of the explosion. So when you think about it, you're looking at, in that last video, you're looking at an above ground explosion that originated from a drone that's of a certain size fired from an Israeli submarine. The drone could not possibly, in any physics on the planet, have carried any type of conventional non-nuclear material, weapon, etc., that could create enough heat to transfer enough heat down into those locations to then cause that kind of a blast. And it was a heat weapon. So it has to be some kind of a nuclear device, and it's not a big one that left crud all over the place that you can see everywhere with nuclear material. It was a very tiny amount, low residue nuclear device. That would seem to be the case. If somebody else has other information, they want to argue it, I'm not going to get bogged down in it. That's fine, whatever. They said the Israelis did it. You don't think it was a nuke, fine. But if it was a nuke, you had 4 nukes went off in Syria already. Certainly, the Israelis believed that this was, a huge threat. What did Putin do? He responded by saying that if there were any more of these events in Syria, they were personally going to become very involved. They were not going to sit back and observe while these types of events were taking place on Syrian soil. And they doubled down on bringing in their Air Force and bringing in missile protection to Syria to protect Assad and everything else. Well, who was in the background in this whole thing? Whose name were you hearing during all of those exchanges, conversations, etc.? Hezbollah. Hezbollah, 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 Hezbollah. Get that in your brain. Hezbollah. I cannot overemphasize what's going on in Syria right now. What's about to happen in Syria right now? Hezbollah happened and is happening. This is what this is all about at this exact moment. Hezbollah is the most powerful, most dug in terrorist organization on the planet, all over the world, in South America, across Asia, as well as the Mideast. And they've been getting a lot of momentum, and they've been working under the radar for a long time. And so Israel, the last time they engaged Hezbollah, about 10 years ago, got their tushes kicked bad. They were not able to, really rout Hezbollah. And Hezbollah's had 10 years without really being on anybody's radar to build up since then and to triple down. Hezbollah is what? The proxy of Iran. So Iran has been pushing all of its dispersal of their armaments, etc., that are aimed at Israel and the great Satan, the United States, out into the world, and doubling down, digging in, getting ready for a conflict. When you're in battle, when you're going to have an engagement, the most important thing is once you've decided you have to engage an enemy, picking the time and picking the location for the beginning of that engagement is a big deal, because that's what gives you the opportunity to at least get a one-up. So you see a prize fighters engage, you see these cage fighters getting ready to engage, and they don't initially just run in there and start flailing away. They're bouncing around and they're jostling and they're looking for the other guy to get into a position that he can start a move, because as soon as you take a move on your opponent, you create your own personal vulnerabilities. So the second you start to strike, that's the opponent's opportunity to hit a weak spot that you've opened up in the course of striking. So you'll see him doing a dance, waiting for that one little opening and maybe doing a little sleight of hand to try to bait him into doing a move that you've anticipated that you're going to respond to, this given back and forth. Hezbollah and the West have been jostling along. Hezbollah and Israel have been jostling along. Those little explosions over the arms depots, nukes, if you want to go that far, were part of that jostling. And Russia jostled back and says, no, we're not going to stand here while this crap goes on. That happens again, we're going to get personally involved. And that stopped. There was no more of those types of explosions after that, and after they were outed by the White House.
Right.
So now you look at this situation, and Hezbollah has to be taken out. The Israelis cannot do it by themselves. They do not have the military strength, short of nuking something. But even if you go in and try to nuke places all over Syria, when you're dug into caves and things like that, a heat weapon, which is all a nuclear weapon is, it gets everything really hot on the surface. But if you're down in a cave, you don't have to be very far in unless it's a direct shot into your specific cave entrance. You're going to survive it. And the weapons are going to survive it. It's even the amount of residue that's there is relatively survivable. So it's the same problem we have in North Korea. People think we're just going to go in there and we're going to kick ass in North Korea and it's not going to be a problem. Are you kidding me? Do you realize what they've got there? They've got 40,000 artillery pieces aimed at Seoul. Do you realize how many air attacks it would take to get those? And they're not just sitting there waiting for you to easily wipe them off the surface. Even in nuclear detonations, you couldn't get enough of them, you know.
Right, and I'm so glad you went there, because there's reports coming out that from South Korea that they're in fact planning, the South Korea Special Forces are planning a surgical strike against North Korea. And my argument, there is no surgical strike, is there?
No.
Is there an option to do that?
Well, the whole idea would be if you take out their command and control, if you take out the kid, that others down through the ranks that are a bit saner would be able to take control. And so part of it's a message to the rest of the military ranks who do want to live, who do want to survive, that if we come in and precisely, surgically take out those key handful of individuals that are the real source of the threats, that we aren't going after the rest of you at your bases and locations, etc. And then we can talk, as long as you stay out of the way. And you don't have, you know, part of the point is to let them all know, yeah, don't have to go visit the fearless leader if you don't have to, because you might be there visiting the one time we decide to take him out. But the reality is that's probably not really going to happen. We're not going to get the opportunity to do a surgical strike to nip this in the bud before it becomes some kind of broader retaliation. And you got to remember too that the people that are in those military positions, they live minute to minute, hour to hour under the threat of some horrible death, you know, and their families. So, you know, we hear all the time and have for decades about the creative ways that they kill off relatives, friends, etc., because there's some perceived slight or loss of faith or a threat to do a coup or something like that. And so the fearless leader has them outed in a very visual way that's a message to everybody else in his ranks. And they keep ranks because of that. They don't break ranks because they don't want to be the next victim. And so they aren't going to take bribes. You know, we go into Iraq or Afghanistan, and we've already bribed all the generals and all of the power players to stay out of the way and cooperate, and they'll have money for their clan. And you know, half of what happened in Iraq for, you know, the last couple of decades is our guys, our special forces, our special services, our GRS, Global Response Staff guys, are taking duffel bags with millions of dollars and distributing them, you know, every day to all the various clans that were supporting them. And in fact, we were laughing the other day. One of my guys was complaining on a particular thing. They had one more guy than they needed, and so you could only stuff 15 duffel bags with $1 million in them into a Chevy Suburban van. And if you throw another guy in there, you got to get rid of a bag. So they had one extra guy that they didn't plan on that came in on a C-130, and so they left a bag with $1 million on the tarmac. And the guy in the C-130 is like, "I don't want to be responsible for this." Well, we can't. The limit is 15 bags, and you got a guy here. It's the guy or the duffel bag. Who do you want us to leave? And the guy just throws the duffel bag with $1 million on it and gets in the plane and they go, or in the rig and they go. And everybody's like, well, fine, whatever. So whatever happened to that $1 million? The C-130 come back and those guys were a little richer. They claim it or not. Well, the guys probably did claim it and let everybody know because those guys don't screw around. So, but the point is that you got opportunities to work behind the scenes to subvert these military people. You're not going to get that same opportunity in North Korea, most likely. So then looking at the big picture again, let me kind of step back and let's look at the big picture. So there's a Jewish component that had a big part in getting Trump elected. They want to get their protection and assistance from Trump, the payback, and the protection assistance payback has to do with Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the greatest threat to Israel at this point in time. They're built out throughout the Syrian territory and ready to go, and they've got real armaments that they've had a decade or more to secret across Syria and Lebanon, and they're ready to take on Israel. They're getting ready. Israel knows that. They have to try to engage. And then what's the political backdrop for all this? Trump is in power, but in the American electoral process, now he's got midterms that start really next summer, going in full swing. And in order to retain a Congress that he can work with, that is, going to be somehow pro-favorable, et cetera, to him, he needs to get those people reelected. So as we get into the election cycle, does he want to be in the middle of a war? Do his handlers want him and their other congressional people that they need to back some kind of a military conflict in the Mideast in Israel's favor? Do they need them not getting reelected because they're in the middle of a war and the American people just are not interested in another war in the Mideast? So they need to do whatever it is they're going to do and somehow bring it to some level of completion, conclusion, etc., before that congressional midterms starts. And so when can you do that? Can you do that in March next spring? No, you really can't, because it's going to take months and months and months and months and months of really intense activity to do it.
Correct.
If you're going to pick a time to do this, you're really limited, and there's local reasons why it doesn't generally happen through the summer, something big like this. You're really down to the last 2 weeks of August up until the end of October, and that's your window. And you get outside of that window and things become much, much, much more convoluted, difficult to pull off. So from a logistics standpoint, we're really looking at this narrow window. There's other things from, a messages in the occult world, etc., stuff that goes on in there too. The most simple of which, these people think in terms of planting and reaping. And so from a planting standpoint, you do that in the spring, you reap in the fall, in your fall harvest, etc. So when is that all about? Well, of course, we're coming into the, they've sowed all these different things that they wanted to do out into the system. They've come to maturity, and in the fall, you're going to go have your little harvest. So that's kind of in the background as part of this, messaging and when the power stuff happens, etc.
Right. Right.
So anyway, this little window is when those people that would want to choose to have an engagement are going to want to get this thing going, so they have a prayer of somehow wrapping it up or bringing it into some type of a new equilibrium before we get into and claim some level of victory or whatever before they get to these midterms. And um, in the course of this whole dance, Russia sees this coming. The Syrians see this coming. Iran sees this coming. Everybody knows that we're going to have this blowout. It's not World War III. It's not Armageddon. It's a regional dust up, but it's coming. And so they're all looking at who's going to pick the timing for that. Now, let me add one more thing. And this is what I believe will be argued as being the trigger for what's about to happen. On July 14th, um, a couple of terrorists got onto the Temple Mount. There were guns that were already secreted there somehow, and they found those guns and then shot a couple of Israeli security guards. Now, the Temple Mount, what's relevant, and I said this in the show the other day with V, but let's repeat it because there may be people that didn't hear this before. The Temple Mount, for quite a while, a couple of decades, because there's Muslim holy sites on the Temple Mount besides the Israeli holy site. Whenever you went to go there to visit it, if you were Jewish or Christian, a Muslim minder was put with you while you toured the Temple Mount. So you got a Muslim minder. Why is he there? He's there to make sure you don't do anything religious to defile the Temple Mount. You can't pray. You can't open a Bible. You can't, cross yourself. No activity of that type at all. So these Muslim minders accompany your group, and you can look, but you can't do anything that would be offensive to the Muslim faith, disrespectful of Allah. And so when the security guards were killed, the Israelis brought in metal detectors the next day. The Jordanian guards who work on the Temple Mount that are Muslim and provide security on the Temple Mount with the Israelis, the Jordanian guards said they would not work under those conditions because somehow having metal detectors and screening Muslim visitors to the Temple Mount with metal detectors is an affront to Allah. So they wouldn't work. They wouldn't go to work on that day. So the Jews that were local arrive, and they go onto the Temple Mount, seize the opportunity to do all sorts of religious acts and prayers and everything on the Temple Mount because there's nobody to stop them. The Muslims are then offended because they've done all of this horrible, disrespectful religious activity on the Temple Mount, and now they're ready for blood because they're defiling the Temple Mount. It comes out, Netanyahu says it a few days later, one of his press people says it, that the guns that were secreted on the Temple Mount were secreted there by Hezbollah operatives. How does he know that? Nobody ever explains how he knows it was Hezbollah operatives that put those guns on the Temple Mount. In fact, and I'll say something in a moment that puts this all maybe into a different perspective. But at the end of the day, they claim that the shootings, the death of the Israelis, notice that nobody else was killed in the Temple Mount. It was Israeli security guards. That's it. No other visitors there were killed or seriously injured or anything. Hezbollah is the bad guys. And then the metal detectors are immediately available and put there, and the Jordanians won't go to work. When you think about how Hezbollah is supposedly reacting to this. And they cannot just turn the cheek. This is the #2 religious site on the planet for Muslims. Hezbollah is going to protect that site, by extension, Iran. They're going to take action to protect that site. Well, somebody's picking the time and the place for the next conflict, the next war. It's a slap on the cheek with the glove. It's the baiting them in. It's drawing the line in the sand. Go ahead and cross it. And so that's what's been going in this give and take back and forth. One of the members of the Knesset amount. Well, those are fighting
next. I'm not sure yet if we'll be doing the Trading Terror Dome today. W back?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great. Okay, yeah, you cut out maybe like the last 10 seconds.
Oh, okay. So at the end of the day, you have this slap on the face with the glove, this line in the sand that cross this and we're going to have a fight. That's what's going on the Temple Mount. I don't even think I think there's at least a question, knowing how false flags are done. Did the activity on the Temple Mount even occur as has been advertised, with the Israeli guards being killed, etc.? I don't know. They probably were, but there's at least a question in my mind. Maybe they weren't. Maybe it was all a staged event to set up a context for this conflict that they're going to have. So what's got to happen? The Israelis can't take Hezbollah on by themselves. A context is being created on the world stage where Hezbollah will then strike back at Israel. They might not strike in Israel, and they might not even strike in the Mideast. If most of your people don't know, but South America, over a decade ago, there was an attack by allegedly Iranian forces, terrorists, against the Israeli embassy in Argentina. And these people were hurt, injured, killed, etc. And that's been a point of contention for a very long time, that the investigation was never really done correctly, because the government in power in Argentina at the time, with Kirchner, was a very corrupt socialist liberal group. Now you have a conservative group in there that is got a different attitude, and there's been some talk that you're going to have a reopening investigation. We know who did it and who they are and all that sort of thing, is the belief, and go after criminally on the international stage those players that lead back to Iran. Who's Hezbollah? Iranian proxies. Hezbollah has a presence in South America. When drugs get to Europe, where do they originate from in this whole chain? The vast majority of them, of certain types, come out of South America through Venezuela, across the ocean to West Africa, and then up from West Africa into Europe. AQIM, Al Qaeda in the Maghreb, is the richest of the terrorist groups of that type. AQIM was involved at Benghazi. They have only a few hundred members in the whole world. They're extremely tight-knit mob organization, and they get all the money. Why? Because they run the drugs to Europe. And so AQIM's route of travel through Venezuela. Venezuela's in meltdown. When the drugs come one direction, what goes the other direction? Arms, munitions. So who's the receiving side of those arms and munitions? Primarily Hezbollah operatives in South America. So you've got other groups in there, but who's making the money in that? The drugs come one way, the guns go the other way. We have guns all over Mexico, and we look at the sources on that, and we're going, this is stuff out of the Mideast. Remember the group that tried to take out the Saudi ambassador there in Washington came up through Mexico and came from the deep South America. Raul Castro up in Cuba was coordinating a lot of that activity in Venezuela before his brother died, and he ended up taking power. So there's all this hidden aspect. Hezbollah could do allegedly some strike or terrorist activity in any number of places across the globe that then would have repercussions, that the whole world has taken offense at what happened here and decide that we have to go engage Hezbollah in Syria, which is their primary power stronghold. And I believe that that's what's getting ready to happen is this, we have to go address Hezbollah, in Syria.
Right. Right. Oh, yeah. Yep.
So when are they going to do that? They're not going to wait. They're going to pick a time. And I believe the context for that is what's going on the Temple Mount and this alleged stuff. It was Hezbollah. And some further event. Now all the Muslim world is being disgraced and their religious side is being defiled. We cannot stand for this. We have to take action. And so they're going to do something. Something's going to happen that's going to be blamed on Hezbollah. Hezbollah is going to say it's being done because it's in retaliation for the evils being done on the second holiest site in the Muslim religion. And, all sides are going to begin this conflict that is this dust up that I've been talking about in the Mideast, and you've got this tight window to make that happen of just a few weeks now.
Excellent. Folks, you heard it here first on Rogue Money. I want to thank W for joining us today. Really appreciate it. W, anything else? Any other closing comments?
There's probably 1,000 things that we could talk about. I'll just say the old tried and true stuff that I have repeated over and over. Don't look at the manipulated price of silver in the markets, and don't worry about trying to pick the timing for picking up silver. The silver, just the way that it's held in the earth, sits towards the surface. So there's very limited quantities of silver. In many ways, it's probably thinner in the total volume that exists, not by total volume, but by accessibility, et cetera, than gold. There's a lot of reasons why. In the AI world that's developing around us, the machine intelligence and everything else, the ability to have silver for connections, contacts, etc., is critical from an industrial standpoint. There's a lot of reasons why just having silver as this reset happens is going to be critical, because what's going to be happening here in the U.S. as we get into this Mideast conflict, we're coming up on all sorts of budget issues and and all of this is going to be happening simultaneous to the drama. Because why? In a magician's act, from a globalist standpoint, let no crisis pass you by.
Go to waste.
Go to waste. So while you're having one crisis in this globalist magician's act, they're going to be doing the real mischief on another crisis. And if it's big enough that you got to have a Mideast conflict dust up engagement, you better do something really big if you got to do it closer in with the puff and flashbang and everything else. And that's related to the dollar and the economy here. So with that in mind, we're coming into a very tenuous moment. They're not going to let the silver manipulation go easily, but at any given moment that could take very wild and bizarre turns, and the caps would be off and it would jump in value pretty radically pretty quickly. The dollar is based on a silver dollar weight. It's not based on gold. The new currency may have some gold backing, gold and everything else, but the core of the whole dollar concept is silver. Just if you get a chance, silver is exceptionally low. We could talk for hours on this. I could go into a long diatribe. We don't have the time. Probably your listeners' ears don't have the endurance for it. Just get some silver coinage, not for numismatic value. If you do, just for modest numismatic value, not huge, big speculative plays, and stuff it away. Forget you got it, and don't think about it. And a few years from now, you'll be like the guy that had some Bitcoin and he stuffed it away somewhere, and he wakes up and it's worth $1 million, and it was just beer money before. Stuff them away.
Yeah, the 17-year-old that didn't have to go to college that started investing told his parents if he became a millionaire by the time he was 18 that he wouldn't have to go to college, and lo and behold, he started buying Bitcoin like at 14.
Yeah. Well, and again,
all right, well,
that's the stuff that of legend, but you will be a genius if you have the right stuff, and that's one of those things that it's an insurance policy. Don't think of it as betting the farm. You don't need to buy bazillions. Just get a little bit. It's an insurance policy against real drama that could take place here in the near future. I don't personally see that the dollar is going to be destroyed. It's not a complete wipeout here in the fall. It's not the end of the world, but it will be some drama in there. And any given moment, things can take a bizarre turn that you can't anticipate well. So if you want to sleep at night, just get a little bit, stuff it in the box, set it aside, forget you got it, and don't watch the day-to-day prices, and don't listen to all the people. You were an idiot for spending all of your money on silver. Don't spend all your money on silver.
Yep.
Just spend a little bit.
And disclaimer, we're not giving financial advice. Do your own research. But W, it's been a great hour. Thank you so much for being with me today, folks. I will be back at 2 p.m. This is CJ. I'll be back at 2 p.m. with Dex for the Trading Terradome. Thank you so much for listening in, and W and I are over and out. Take care, everyone.